We don't have a labor market. We have a collective trauma loop. How to mathematically measure economic hallucination and how to correct for it. Hi, my name is Sarah Trumbull, founder and CEO of the Job Applicant Perspective, first anonymous user reviews for job ads across the U.S. This level of go-to-market awareness as well as public service. I have been economically mapping and auditing these online hiring companies, and I would like to speak to an overall observation that I'm having about the marketplace. So, take a break from that longer work and get to a more succinct point that still is interconnected with those points. Starting from the beginning. For a human being, sensory deprivation is not a neutral state. Lose feeling in your legs and you don't think, interesting. You panic. Your nervous system treats the absence of signal as a threat because it is. Something that should be talking to you has gone silent, and your body knows before your mind does that silence in a survival system is not peace, it's emergency. It works the same relationally. You're waiting to hear from someone who matters to you. The phone doesn't ring. You don't settle into comfortable equilibrium. You start composing the message you haven't sent. You check it twice. You wonder what you did. The absence of feedback doesn't leave you neutral. It activates you. Fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. We are wired at every level to treat silence from something that matters as a signal that something is wrong. The online job market has been an exercise in sensory deprivation between the market's two stakeholders for 25 years. Like a phone with its cord cut when it moved online, because not connecting didn't mean people wouldn't keep dialing. And as a society, we have the collective nervous system to show for it. Who this is for? Job seekers who have sent thousands of applications into silence, begged institutions for support from all angles, were studied and dismissed like research animals, and concluded the problem must be them. Cannot understate. This feels like a secular religion to me. I don't understand it. It's obviously illogical. But employers who are drowning, I do understand. That's what I'm about to talk about. Employers who are drowning in a flood of candidates who cannot understand why none of them seem right, who keep getting ghosted on interviews and having people quit out of nowhere. Municipalities watching their workforce and society hollow out and their tax base erode and being handed explanations that do not quite add up. Economists, journalists, academics, and public policy, civil unrest and social disarray is what happens at scale when you remove feedback from a market, a public utility that controls access to every other public utility and the safety net and survival of your citizens, and call the resulting hallucination an economy. Said what I said. How we govern a marketplace. Hiring is a marketplace, and like all marketplaces, its only job is to broker relationships between human beings. It is supposed to be bidirectional. When hiring moved online, however, that relationship was quietly severed. A marketplace once governed by two stakeholders became a dictatorship governed by one. Every healthy marketplace relies on three distinct feedback loops to stay anchored to reality, as far as I can see. First, financial. You buy the shoes or you don't. You purchase the concert tickets or you decline to purchase them. Money moves or it doesn't, and the market learns. Cool. Second, presence. You bought the ticket, but do you actually show up? When you show up, are you respectful of the experience or rowdy at the kids' show? Your physical presence communicates what money alone cannot, the way you behave or don't behave there. 3, user experience. The hotel note card, the star rating the Rotten Tomatoes review, direct, unfiltered feedback. Before the internet, job seekers held all 3 of these cards. Job seekers exercised financial governance because they paid for the newspaper. Remember, the newspaper was the labor market before this. They paid for it. If the listings were nonsense, the workforce walked down to the physical office to deliver blistering in-person user reviews. Even without a modern star rating, feedback on the street, at the coffee shop, or through an uncle's neighbor was immediate and real. The employers themselves trusted the integrity of the market enough to know that when a workforce exercised presence, they simply didn't show up. That said volumes about the quality of the offer they had made. Employers were forced to listen and adjust. When hiring moved online, 2 of those 3 loops vanished overnight. The workforce lost its financial leverage and it lost its voice. The only tool left was presence. Do you show up or do you stay away? Consider what employment actually is. It is a human being's sole access to food, shelter, clothing, and healthcare for themselves and their children. Retirement. For the workforce to collectively withhold their presence at such a massive, agonizing scale that it forced major newspapers to report on it and academics to study it for a decade, that wasn't a casual choice. It was a massive, system-wide vote of no confidence. They didn't even talk to each other about it because they were trying to protect their ability to stay employed the same way. That wasn't like there's no mass organized. I'm the first person, just as far as I know, to be actively talking like this, but I'm one of many that are emerging in this time frame. It was a massive system-wide vote of no confidence. These echo chambers were going to do. It was massive. It was the workforce screaming that the market was broken. Depressed wages, burnt out workforce, markets subsidized by an entire government institution despite making billions in profits, local shops putting paper signs in store windows and on the street. Whether you look at this through psychology, systems theory, economics, game theory, cybernetics, information theory, or just plain economics 101, it is all saying precisely the same thing. All of it. In one of the most textbook cases of epistemic collapse in modern history, the governors of the market, public policy politicians, employers, academics, and journalists chose to take explicit and widespread evidence of systemic, economic, and thus psychological harm and relabel it as a pathology of the victims. They looked at a broken machine and called it a skills gap and a talent shortage. They looked at the people they set on fire and told them to stop complaining so much it makes you look unemployable. They genuinely. Foreign corporations actively profited from denying their citizens access to food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare. And they defended the corporations. I literally documented it for you. You've defended the people who hurt your citizens at scale to the hundreds of billions. Like, what? While further abusing their citizens with the lack of support. The collective echo chamber style disconnection from reality cannot be understated. Information warfare in a fashion emerging from the complex system, organically, intended, or a mix of both, it's tough to say. I'm not saying I know. I'm just saying when you industrialize market chaos because you promise to not help, like, of course you can get bad actors authentically just trying to do bad things. Of course it doesn't require that to be the origin point. Further evidence that the market vendors were not bringing value to the job seekers, not one of them spoke up in the workforce's defense ever. Consider what that silence means. Imagine Disney's response if academics began publishing papers suggesting children simply lack the ability to have fun. And Disney said nothing. Disney's value depends on children having fun. They would never stay silent. But as game theory demonstrates, when your revenue does not depend on bringing value to one side of your market, when their devaluation is part of your profit model, you have no reason to defend them. The vendors stayed silent because the workforce was never their customer nor the product they were selling. They marketed exclusivity, ease, and the perception of connection to employment. They actively sold dysfunction, which reinforced the narrative of the superior identity of employee. Collectively, employers were happy to get both. Vendors were more than happy collectively to build hope casinos instead of hiring solutions. Economically, this is absolute absurdity. The workforce was the unpaid revenue generator that made those products possible. You do not defend what you never served, and your profit models were built around economically and thus psychologically extracting value from. And let's be fair, that's also physically, isn't it? Because that's less good food sources, less safety, You are instead just grateful. It's more profitable because it's less effort, and it lets your victims know that no help is coming and they will never be believed. Anthropologist Margaret Mead is supposed to have said that the earliest sign of civilizations in an ancient culture was a healed femur, evidence that someone had been cared for and protected while they were unable to fend for themselves. The modern digital labor market reverses this civilizational principle. Instead of bonding in vulnerability for communal well-being, we ask that our vulnerable should enter total isolation, endure an unmonitored and extractive process that it itself admits is extractive in its own filings as the mandatory price for admission to maybe get to participate in the economy, to be allowed social accepted identity and access to civilization's benefits. The powerful leadership keeps seeing their country get inexplicably weaker, utterly forgetting what an economic system is and collectively confused as to why it should matter. What is wrong? The Delusion Index. I want to offer a framework for measuring why this is happening. The powerful leadership is totally disconnected from this Delusion Index. I want to offer a framework for measuring why this happened. I formally hypothesize the Delusion Index of a marketplace is inversely proportional to the feedback it's willing to take from the people it impacts, as in delusion equals 1 over the feedback. So when you have a lot of feedback, no delusion. The narrower and narrower the feedback gets, the higher the Delusion Index gets. Somebody else from a different field called what I suggested an observer collapse function. The less feedback a system accepts, the more diluted it becomes about its own function. The nature of that feedback, the ratios and the styles will change context to context. We agree. But feedback always keeps us grounded in reality. Consequences are not what make a person bad. They are what make them real. And the harm of that delusion is the delusion multiplied by the impact it has on the people it's ignoring. A tennis shoe, H equals I times D. A tennis shoe marketplace that ignores customers' feedback might be very diluted. But a survival market that removes feedback from the people it impacts, that is something else entirely. It is a mathematically calculable economic hallucination, and we have been living inside of it for 25 years or so, give or take. I'm taking a pause to auditing companies to demonstrate the structure at play in maintaining this structural delusion as I see it. Collective trauma loop. A job market is a collective trauma loop being reinforced daily, hourly, every minute. While it functions in essence as a public utility, controlling access to every public utility, it exists outside of regulation and reputation mechanisms for 98% of its users easily. And that's only supposing that half the U.S. workforce is looking for work at any given time, which at this point, 25 years in, with Nash disequilibriums and Jevons paradoxes running rampant through the market, it's probably much worse. It's not about profit with malice. It's about profit with ease. Profit without discipline towards the people it's supposed to bring value to is another way to say profit in the pain. The financial situations of its two stakeholders has overall polarized them into two raw, dysregulated states as far as I can see. Job seekers in the fight state. Job seekers are in the fight state because they're being ignored in a market that controls their whole ability to survive and protect their children. They magnify agency and effort. They're frantically pulling the slot machine lever, hacking the system, and screaming for signal. They're in a high energy, high aggression race to be seen. They play identity, credentialing, look at me theater, performing positivity while I'm drowning. Employers, the free state. The experts and employers are in functional free state. They're overwhelmed by the flood of information. They're financially safe at the moment. They've numbed out. They use algorithms to soothe the terror of the complexity, the same way people use drugs or alcohol to soothe and numb out. They're in functional freeze. The brake and the gas are being pressed at the same time. Honestly, I think it's like they made the mistake of falling for Mark Twain's old thing, lies, saying lies and statistics, but use lies, saying lies and data. The platforms overwhelmed them with data. They thought they were being smart. and they're just being dysregulated on purpose on that side too in my brain. You have to be careful about intent, because I almost think it's lack of diligence, ease. The problem. Yeah, regardless, we don't have a labor market. We have a collective trauma loop with algorithmic ratio reinforcement as the hook. You're stressed, you're stressed, you're stressed. Bing! There's a notification of a new candidate. Bing! There's a notification of a job that just might hit. Or CEO version. Bing! There's a notification of a new AI innovation, something new for hiring. We have to stop looking at each other and start looking directly at the middle. The evidence already exists. It's not a new argument. The case has already been made, company by company, filing by filing. Taleo, Workday, SuccessFactors, ZipRecruiter, Indeed, Robert Half, their own publicly audited filing documents document the failure to instrument 98% of a survival market. The importance of not knowing what the job seeker was experiencing and the job seeker not being able to meaningfully consent to the engagement was literally baked into the information asymmetry their audited filings demonstrate. It was not an accident of technology, as Robert Half themselves demonstrated. It is a business model. Information asymmetry as a service in a market for human survival as the standard. What HR tech and the algorithms did was scale it globally, atomize its victims, and amplify the economic extraction at scale. Companies openly describing 99.7 waste to 98% of their users. I'm referencing Indeed here. For years, Indeed did this. And being praised for their profits by all institutions, public, journalistic, academic, and all otherwise, whose actual job it was to prevent this. What? It's just wild to me. We have documented it in detail. Hundreds of billions in value lost between 6 companies only, conservatively, hundreds of billions yearly in Indeed's case. And you're congratulating Recruit Holdings and blaming the citizens your job was to protect. This isn't just malice, it's structural delusion, leading to historic levels of economic, psychological, social, and civic harm. I submit the Delusion Index represents a framework for putting dollar signs to the economic magnitude of that harm. How much economic value does food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare and identity represent? How long has it been since each market player was actively required to take and incorporate feedback? Not just incorporate, like adapt to the feedback. If you don't have an adaptable market, you don't have a market. Like, what are we talking about? These things can be documented via the instrumentation they do or don't possess and the public archive. This is not a final answer, it's a framework. The Delusion Index represents a public policy argument also that business, economics, and marketing need to join law, medicine, and education in embracing licensure. Academic credentials say, I have the training. I know the frameworks. Licensure says, I am willing to receive and integrate feedback from the people and my experience, my expertise impacts, or lose access to be calling an expert. You can't call yourself an expert in doctoring all the time when you lose your license. You can still be used, but you give information to everybody using you that says this person violated the norms of their field. There are no norms, then the field is not required to be connected to reality anymore. Like, they lost the plot. When you become like a grammar teacher instead of linguist in terms of the job seeker experience, they're linguists for employers, they're grammar teachers for job seekers, which means they don't know what a two-sided market is. They don't know what it is. And they're in charge of these things. Like, I don't even, excuse me. Knowing the frameworks of your field is necessary. Being required to observe whether those frameworks hold in the real world, whether you share reality with the people your frameworks affect, is also necessary. Yeah. Like, I think I said it already, but let's be clear here. Nobody's arguing that you are supposed to, like, applicants can ask for 25 cents. I mean, people, user feedback for a gas station could be that I want to pay 25 cents for a gallon of gas. It doesn't mean you're going to give it to them. My daughter also wants to eat ice cream 3 times a day. She doesn't get to eat ice cream 3 times a day, but I have the capacity to tell you she wants to eat ice cream 3 times a day. I make a decision whether or not she wants it, because I can, but I'm still connected to reality because I know what she wants, I could say that I'm making decisions separately from her. We're not the same person. We're separate people. Litigation is not enough, though. Compensation looks backwards. It names the harm. It assigns responsibility, and that matters. And it takes up the regulation at this point. That at this point, public governments seem unable to enact. Public policy and licensure is a lovely space for social repair and surgery, but it does not fix the market. The patients are still bleeding on the battlefield while being belittled by their economic leaders for whining. The collective trauma loop does not end with a settlement. It ends when the feedback is restored, when the job seeker's experience becomes legible, necessary information again to the market that impacts them. That requires something harder than litigation. It requires change. As has been said in my field, sometimes the hardest systems to update are the ones in our own minds. You can check, I checked the research section is weird here, but I'm not claiming, I want to be clear, to be an engineer, a psychologist, or an economist, a biologist, any of that. I'm claiming to have seen the same shape across all of these fields. I'm in SEC filings, in trauma literature, in engineering, in economics, and in relationships. You cannot have a system function without feedback. That's not how it works. This is just saying that in a very real way. The system is not just physical, it is structural. My work in this article is synthesis, not research. It is an isomorphism I have observed from my study of these filings and observations of this market. The job applicant perspective. The job applicant perspective exists because a two-sided market cannot function without feedback from both sides. It cannot claim to deliver market utility without feedback from both sides. That isn't just an opinion. It is the fundamental physics of physics, engineering, systems, and commerce. The logo is the brand. Whether the water droplet is small to the tree or the tree is tiny to the water droplet is really just a matter of perspectives. We share the same frame. We share the same system, not the same frame. They are both the same system. They nourish each other. A market's job is not to guarantee outcomes. It's to make the transaction legible. In the pre-digital era, that legibility was maintained by local proximity and human networks. In the online era, that is impossible. Left to themselves, online platforms will always choose engagement over solutions. Even if every human seller and buyer across the earth was a perfect angel, the financial incentives of the online vendors would create extraction. In the digital age, legibility can only be guaranteed by one thing: public, transparent reputation. TJAP restores exactly what the internet stripped away: hiring market legibility, reputation, unfiltered legibility by using recursive, adaptive Bayesian statistics running under strict protocols to kill gamification. I spoke to those protocols previously in the nervous system of human trust and designing a trust-constrained labor market. We make the market legible again to the next job seeker, the next employer, and the system itself. It doesn't even know what it is. I mean, Robert have already demonstrated it. They don't know what they are. This isn't about catering to every complaint. I did right, good. You cannot sell gas for 25 cents just because a user wants it. But it is about being able to acknowledge that you are aware this wasn't a decision the workforce wanted and that you made it anyway. Even when there is opposition to cutting X to fund Y, the decision can still be made and acknowledged honestly. The reference frame monarchy. People who are the monarchs genuinely forget other people exist in a world that's not theirs. We all do it without accountability because they don't have accountability. They're not being forced to engage with reality. It brings markets back to earth as much as it brings people back to earth. And this is about survival. A market that cannot hear the people it impacts is no longer a market. It is a hallucination. And when that hallucination controls access to food, shelter, and healthcare for literally billions of people, it inflicts harm at a scale that has been an unacknowledged economic, psychological, and social emergency for more than a decade. TJAP is one of the signals the market needs to find its equilibrium again. One of, not an endpoint, a beginning. The lifeblood of this market was its bidirectionality. In the Disney movie Moana, when Maui stole the heart of Tafiti, he did not intend harm to create. He did not need to intend harm to create it. He just had to be insulated, arrogant, and unwilling to look at the damage he caused. The tech industry did the same to the labor market. We do not require permission to put the heart back. But for the institutions that have spent 25 years refusing to listen, rebuilding their non-existent credibility starts right here. No one dies from learning to work for a living, or rather, for a reputation. You think about it. They feel entitled to be perceived as good without actually having to do the work to be good. Entitled. They feel titled. It's an aristocracy of reputation, not of economics in the same way, of reputation, of social reputation. It's an aristocracy of reputation. No one dies from learning to work for their reputation, to earn it. You cannot borrow against a reputation that you yourself destroyed. Employers, by not listening, employers are trust bankrupt, and until they acknowledge that, nothing moves. You are, like, the elite, the experts are trust bankrupt when it comes to this market. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. Economics, infrastructure, emotional infrastructure of this market is economic infrastructure. It is. You're trust bankrupts. In a very real way, to riff on Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamiltonian debate, we must assume the reputational debt so the market gets a new line of credit, a financial diuretic. How do you not get it? If we're aggressive and competitive, the market gets a boost. You'd rather give it a sedative? Like what Miranda was saying, I never understood what he had meant before until I realized it's not about having all the answers right now. It's about acknowledging that the debt exists. You acknowledge the debt exists. Acknowledge the trust needs to be re-earned, and you solve it. The more you deny that trust needs to be re-earned, the more the market dies, the more the economy dies, the more everything splits apart. You acknowledge the debt, and you can get a financial diuretic. TJAP is the opportunity to finally stop the delusion and start learning. Job seekers can do it without you. You can start routing around the bad guys, the bad actors, like at least some, and making some impact in the market. But the level to which these institutional players need to earn their reputation back, the level to which they have betrayed their friends, family, and neighbors is off the charts. CPTSD for the entire workforce. Like, what happens, what causes this is lack of caring. Not all employers, not all men, not all algorithms. AI, for me, these algorithms are economic MacGuffins. AI is structural God and Satan all at once. It's the reason that you made the decision and the reason the decision went wrong and the reason you should still stay in power because it's not your fault. It's the algorithm. We need just to change the data, right? Yeah, no, you need to acknowledge the trust debt. That's the problem. Algorithms are MacGuffin. When you don't instrument 98% of your market, you have no way of assessing whether your algorithm is good or bad because you made such a strong effort to never know. Perfection is such a myth. It's not just a myth, it's an act of harm. Like, to only feel valuable if you're perfect is to need to not know when you're imperfect and to need and have your identity be defined by your right to feel perfect. It's entitlement to a social reputation. You don't have it. It doesn't exist. That's what kills the economy here. Inability to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge that economic infrastructure is emotional infrastructure is economic infrastructure here. Trust. I'm really just saying what everybody has already said. Trust is required. Economic markets require trust. Emotional infrastructure is economic infrastructure. I wrote a paper about it on SSRN, referencing my other stuff. I know, but my own economic system analysis here. Sorry, getting back to the point here. TJAP is the opportunity to finally stop the delusion and start learning. Harm reduction is mathematically calculable. There is a second implication of harm of H equals I times D that is worth sitting with. If harm decreases as feedback decreases, harm increases as feedback decreases, which it does, harm increases as feedback decreases, then every piece of feedback heard reduces social harm. Not metaphorically, mathematically. Every job seeker review that gets read by the next applicant creates connection out of shared misery. Every employer who learns something true about what their hiring process actually feels like adjusts the market a little bit to meet its function. Every municipality that gets accurate data about what their workforce's experience can actually support them instead of subsidizing their abusers. Each one of these is measurable. Reduction in the size of the hallucination. A reduction in delusion is a reduction in harm. This is not rescue. Desmond Tutu understood this. It's like steam coming off of a teapot. Trauma psychologists have been saying it for decades. People do not always need to be rescued. They need to be witnessed so they can rescue themselves. The feedback infrastructure is not a fix imposed from above. It is a collective map being built in real time by the people who are actually living inside the territory. Every review is a data point. Every data point is a correction to the hallucination. Every correction is harm reduced, like a Vietnam War memorial for the gaslit billions, creating their own statues to their own stories, sharing what they feel comfortable sharing, and knowing that every little bit helped, that it brought healing to someone else. That is what TJAP is building. Not a perfect market, a witnessed one. And a witness market, one where the experience of the people it impacts is legible and honored as true for the person who experienced it, is a market that can find its way back to equilibrium. That is wayfinding. That is repair. You have to, that's what I said when I talked about the great gaslighting, you have to learn how to hold responsibility for your choices instead of offloading it on other people. You have to hold it. Hold the dislike. Hold it. Be a leader, not a supervisor. Be a leader. If you make a decision that isn't going to be universally liked, that's okay sometimes. You don't need, your likedness doesn't describe who you are. Your decision to act with integrity does. We are losing the plot here, and I mean to help unlose it. In a very real way, another analogy I made today, so the labor market is like the farmer's fields, the modern era, right? ATS, HR tech, talent staffing. Yeah, that's like the grain silos and the elevators. Employers are like the people buying the crops. Some people sell them potatoes and some sell them apples and some sell them soybeans, whatever it is, right? Except in the labor market's like space, everybody in the economy relies on these farmers to eat. These silos are making hundreds of billions. Billionaire investors like pride themselves on investing in these silos. So we know that that labor that the farmers are making is profitable. But the one thing we can't do is have the farmers talk to each other or tell the market, like, so they can decide which silo they want to sell their product to. And employers are actively choosing to let the silos sit under their logos while actively choosing to not investigate those silos at all. Like, you want to be the unilateral governors of a two-sided market without actually acting like it. Of course the market falls apart, not because the market needs to be remade or redone or anything like that, but because basic economic standard principles need to be applied to this market. It's not like new. It's old. It's standard. It's standard economics needs to apply to this market too. The problem isn't the job seekers. The problem is the vendors and the employers every last step of the way. The problem is the public policy that didn't try to make this market into a marketplace because they didn't require the market to adapt to its users. They only required it to ignore the users and invalidate the users. It's not job seekers at all. Every help to the market is, here's how you can adapt, job seekers. No, here's how the market can adapt to you. Here's how the market can learn from you. Here's how the market can listen to you. And here's the repercussions for the market that didn't listen to you, that took from you, that extracted from you. Here's for the employers who funded and built and operated and invested in this. Here's what's going to happen to them for having done that. That's repair. Failure to do that is just enabling abuse. Like, it's not that it's always going to be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. And we can agree to disagree about what feedback looks like in any particular space, for staffing and recruiting, for people who are deaf, for people who are blind, for people who are, French speaking, Africans, like I'm saying words out loud, but you get the idea that obviously the type of user review changes, and we're going to all of us debate on how much and how little and all that. But the fact that it doesn't exist at all, I mean, there's no debate about that. It's black and white. So, and I think you can calculate the degree of the economic harm from how long it's been. It's pretty much all the money that the workforce is owed for all the labor that they did. And, like the rest. But again, it's a framework. It's not an answer. It's a framework for looking at it. So my next one's going to be on Kelly services. I'm going to do them next. They're easy. These get a little long. And I just want to make it a little easier for myself in terms of the research and stuff. But yeah. So anyway, we'll keep going. My bet is with a friend about who's going to move their money last, because it's over. I just feel like these carriage tycoons mocking. There's no justification for this market. It's going to be over soon enough. And a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. Like, I don't know. I just don't understand. But I do understand. It's a level of an economic delusion. They're in a delusion, struggling to change, they're struggling to see it's identity related. But we got to do what we got to do. So we'll start in the beginning. Anyway, sorry, no, we're not in the beginning, we're in the middle. But regardless, have a great day. Be kind to each other. Be seen. Remember, the internet made the world into a snowstorm. The way you get through it is listening to the people on the roads. Stay sane out there.